Welcome to IELTS On Air. Today's video is intended for anyone who is stuck at a lower score than their target. If you're unable to increase your IELTS speaking score despite everything you have tried, let's try to understand why, focusing on band descriptors for Band 5 and Band 6. If you have never taken IELTS before and have no idea about your level, I'll recommend two options. First, take the test to have some experience and to see your level. Or study with a teacher who has a good understanding of IELTS scores. Here, the second option is better, as the teacher will give you a breakdown of your score, while the exam result will only give you the final score. For example, on your result document, you will only see speaking 5.5 or 5, but you're not given the details of your score, which makes it hard to understand which areas require more focus. With a teacher, however, you can get feedback on how well you do at each criterion, namely fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. So it will be much easier to have a study plan that suits your needs. Let's briefly remember what these criterions are. Fluency and coherence. This measures how smoothly you speak and how well you can organize your ideas. You should aim to speak at a natural pace, avoid too many pauses or hesitations, and connect your ideas logically. A second criterion is lexical resource. This evaluates your vocabulary, using a range of words and expressions accurately, as well as demonstrating the ability to paraphrase. It is also important to use vocabulary that is appropriate for the topic. As for grammatical range and accuracy, this focuses on your use of grammar. You should try to use a variety of grammatical structures accurately. Errors should be minimal and should not affect communication. And lastly, pronunciation. This assesses how well you are understood. Clear pronunciation, appropriate intonation, and natural rhythm are important. You don't need to have a native accent, but your speech should be intelligible. Now let's go to take IELTS.britishcouncil.org to see the band descriptors for Band 5. Let's begin with the first criterion, which is fluency and coherence. So it says, usually able to keep going, but relies on repetition and self-correction or slow speech. Hesitations are often associated with mid-sentence searches for fairly basic lexis and grammar. Overuse of certain discourse markers, connectives, and other cohesive features. More complex speech usually causes disfluency, but simpler language may be produced fluently. If you remember my previous video on the assessment criteria for Band 7, I explained you about the difference between language-related hesitations and content-related hesitations. Let's briefly remember this key indicator. As the level of candidate increases, hesitations are usually content-related. I mean, the candidate may just be thinking about what to say next, which is normal. We all do it when speaking in our native language as well. Being fluent doesn't mean speaking like a machine. You will of course pause a bit or will correct yourself from time to time, but how often you do this will determine your score. So what is a language-related hesitation then? This is about trying to formulate sentences during speech or reformulating your sentences, correcting yourself all the time, or trying to remember a word and not being able to find the correct one and keep thinking and thinking. Being stuck in the middle of the speech because you cannot form a sentence or remember a word. So the examiner will see if your hesitations are content-related or language-related, and she will also take into account the frequency of this during the test. For Band 7, your hesitations, corrections, and so on should not affect the integrity of your speech. If your hesitations are mainly language-related, and if you pose more than you should, then your score for fluency and coherence will go down to 6 or 5, depending on the density. Another key indicator for this criterion is the ability to use linkers and cohesive features. If you're overusing some connectors and linkers like, for example, I think and so on, with lots of repetition and self-correction, and if you're only able to make simple and very basic sentences fluently, then you will get 5. Let's continue with lexical resource. First, see the criteria. So it says resource sufficient to discuss familiar and unfamiliar topics, but there is limited flexibility. Attempts for a phrase, but not always with success. In my other video where I talked about Band 7, I drew your attention to the term flexibility, as this was one of the key indicators for Band 7. So, flexibility means being effortless, using a range of vocabulary without an obvious difficulty. So here, as you can see, a Band 5 candidate is unable to provide a range of vocabulary effortlessly. He or she can only talk about familiar topics and can offer a phrase. In other words, they cannot find alternative ways of saying things. If you think you have a problem with vocabulary, all you can do is to learn vocabulary in context. Do not try to memorize words randomly. Choose topics and try to learn words, collocations, less common phrases, or idiomatic items relating to the topic you choose. I will talk about this in detail in another video. But just to give an example here, let's choose a popular topic for IELTS, such as living abroad. Now let's write benefits and drawbacks of living abroad on Google and try to find some information either from essays or blogs. Actually, any material in English will help. While reading, take notes and make a list. Let's briefly see my own list. Cultural exposure, broaden perspectives, being exposed to diverse cultures and lifestyles, having a more open-minded worldview, language immersion, being a bilingual individual in a globalized world, having better job prospects, and being self-reliant. As you can see, the list is full of high level of vocabulary which are taken from some random English scripts which are available on Google. As I said earlier, I will make another video on how to learn topic vocabulary. Please subscribe if you haven't already and turn on your notifications not to miss on my weekly videos. Let's continue with grammar and accuracy. Here the criterion says, basic sentence forms are fairly well controlled for accuracy. Complex structures are attempted, but these are limited in range, nearly always contain errors, and may lead to the need for reformulation. So Band 5 is able to make basic sentences without any mistakes, but they cannot use complex structures accurately, or they cannot provide enough range. Low level of candidates tend to heavily rely on present simple or present continuous, and their sentences are usually basic and short. To increase your score for grammar, please pay attention to the use of different tenses, comparatives, relative clauses, gerunds, conditionals, simple sentences, and complex sentences. So increase the variety in your grammatical structures. I'd like to recommend a book for studying grammar. Yes, the internet is full of information, but it is better if you study grammar in IELTS format. For that, I recommend Grammar for IELTS by Diana Hopkins and Pauline Cullen. This book has great content as it introduces grammar and also vocabulary through IELTS topics. So you will be studying for IELTS and grammar at the same time, and this will increase your awareness on how to use different structures both for speaking and writing. Please note that this is not an advertising. As a teacher, I just recommend what I find useful. It will be your choice which book to use for your studies. Let's move on to the next criterion, which is pronunciation. So it says, displays all the positive features of Band 4 and some, but not all of the positive features of Band 6. So, Band 5 pronunciation is a mixture of Band 4 and Band 6. So firstly, let's check the descriptor for Band 4. So it says, uses some acceptable phonological features, but the range is limited. Produces some acceptable chunking, but there are frequent lapses in overall rhythm. Attempts to use intonation and stress, but control is limited. Individual words or phonemes are frequently mispronounced, causing lack of clarity. Understanding requires some effort, and there may be patches of speech that cannot be understood. So a Band 5 should meet all the positive features of Band 4 for pronunciation. Now let's see the descriptor for Band 6 for pronunciation. So it says, uses a range of phonological features, but control is variable. Chunking is generally appropriate, but rhythm may be affected by a lack of stress timing or a rapid speech rate. Some effective use of intonation and stress, but this isn't sustained. Individual words or phonemes may be mispronounced, but this causes only occasional lack of clarity. Can generally be understood throughout without much effort. So in order to get 5, you should meet some of the positive features of Band 6 for pronunciation. To improve your pronunciation, pay attention to having clear pronunciation, appropriate intonation, and natural rhythm, and your speech should be intelligible. Firstly, do not worry about your accent. The examiner will not judge your accent unless it has some effect on intelligibility, causing certain difficulties for the listener. But here, having a clear pronunciation should be your target, not sounding like a native. And please do not speak too fast or too slow. You should have an appropriate speech rate. As English is a stress-timed language, so be careful with sentence and word stress. Some languages have a very flat intonation, so if you have a such mother tongue, then you may need to bring some rhythm to your speech. For this, all you can do is listening to the native speakers and repeating or copying what they're doing. You can also use online dictionaries as they provide the pronunciation of the words. But to improve your overall pronunciation, you need to do repetitions at the sentence level. For that, you can watch podcasts, interviews, or anything in English with subtitles. You can stop the video, repeat the sentence over and over again until you're satisfied with your level. Some people think that it is easy to jump from 5 or 5.5 to 6 or even to 6.5 as there is only one band score difference. Unfortunately, there is something that they misunderstand here. The examiner does not give you your final score. The system calculates your score based on what she gave you for each criterion. So, you need to focus on each criterion separately to increase your score. And this is true for anyone who wishes to increase their score, not just for lower levels. As you may not know which of these criteria is taking your score down, as I said earlier, it is best to talk with a teacher who can identify the problem so that you can give more attention to your weak spots. So if you are 5 or 5.5 and needing 6 or 6.5, please first focus on your language skills. Without fixing certain problems, you cannot achieve a higher score, which is why identifying the problem first is crucial. Please write in the comments your weak spots. What do you think your biggest problem in speaking is? And do you have a study plan? Dear friends, to get 6.5, you need to score 7 from 2 of the 4 assessment criteria, and there is a huge difference between 5.5 and 6.5. For example, if you're 5.5, this means you got a mix of 5 and 6. If you're 6.5, then the scenario can be like this. Please see my other video on the assessment criteria to understand what to do to get Band 7. Now let's continue with Band 6. This band score is so important because if a low level of candidate can achieve 6, after being stuck at 5 or 5.5 for a long time, then it means the candidate has started making progress and passed an important threshold. Because in the assessment chart, 6 is where the high level of language use begins. Now let's see the band description for 6 fluency and coherence criterion. So it says, able to keep going and demonstrates a willingness to produce long turns. Coherence may be lost at times as a result of hesitation, repetition, or self-correction. Uses a range of spoken discourse markers, connectives, and cohesive features, though not always appropriately. So at this level, the examiner shouldn't need to encourage you to speak all the time by asking constantly why or how. You need to show willingness to give appropriately long answers. Hesitations here should be again mostly content-related, not language-related. And you should be able to use a range of linkers and connectors. As for lexical resource, here the criterion says, resource sufficient to discuss topics at length. Vocabulary use may be inappropriate, but meaning is clear. generally able to form a phrase successfully. So at this level, a candidate should be able to discuss topics comfortably using a range of vocabulary appropriately. Some mistakes are tolerable, but the meaning should be clear. Do not use a word just because you think it's a high level of vocab or thinking that it is cool to use it. Also pay attention to the style, not too formal or not too informal either. Please avoid using slangs or inappropriate language. If you think you have a problem with vocabulary, all you can do is to learn vocabulary in context. Just as I explained for Band 5 earlier, this is all you need to do at any levels. Do not try to memorize vocabulary randomly. Choose topics and try to learn words, collocations, less common phrases, or idiomatic items relating to the topic you choose. I will talk about this in detail in another video. Let's continue with grammar and accuracy. So the criterion says, produces a mix of short and complex sentence forms and a variety of structures with limited flexibility. Though errors frequently occur in complex structures, these rarely impede communication. So for Band 6, you should be able to make both simple and complex structures such as the use of different tenses, comparatives, relative clauses, gerunds, conditionals, simple sentences, and complex sentences. But here it says with limited flexibility, meaning some mistakes will be tolerable. So remember, for Band 7, the requirement was the flexible use of complex structures. So according to the criterion for Band 6, it's okay to have some difficulty when formulating sentences, and also mistakes will be acceptable unless they have an effect on communication. And the density of errors also is important, as with too many mistakes, your grammar score can go down to 5. Let's continue with pronunciation. So the criterion says uses a range of phonological features, but control is variable. Chunking is generally appropriate, but rhythm may be affected by a lack of stress timing or a rapid speech rate. Some effective use of intonation and stress, but this isn't sustained. Individual words or phonemes may be mispronounced, but this causes only occasional lack of clarity. Can generally be understood throughout without much effort. Here the key indicator for Band 6 pronunciation is, as the last sentence highlights, intelligibility without much effort shown by the listener. To improve your pronunciation, I will repeat the same suggestions as I did for Band 5, so please listen to the part where I explained Band 5 pronunciation. And another important point I'd like to mention is that each band score has its own variations. For example, there can be some differences between two candidates who got the same band score. What do I mean by this? There is a weak 6 and a strong 6, or there is a weak 7 or a strong 7. For example, a weak 6 is the candidate who has just achieved 6, and you can hardly expect them to be consistent at this level. If they take the test again, and if they're asked unfamiliar questions, the score can easily go down to 5. So these candidates are at the border, somewhere between 5, 5.5, and 6. A strong 6, on the other hand, is the candidate who has just missed 6.5 or 7, meaning with some luck, they can easily achieve a higher score. So, identifying the strong or the weak of a particular band score is also important, as these two individuals will have different needs when studying. So, friends, please take these assessment standards into account while making your study plan. To have an efficient study plan, you need to understand how far you are from your target score. So, dear friends, I hope you'll find the video useful. Please write in the comments if you have any questions. You may also see my other videos to get more information on the speaking part of the test. To benefit from our unique content, please subscribe. Thank you for listening.